Hello there, my name is David Pustansky and welcome to this Extreamed.tv review of the Evercade game, the Oliver Twins collection, as we can see here on the Evercade. Let's get into it. Now, for players who grew up in the UK playing games on machines like the Amiga 500, the ZX Spectrum or the Atari ST, the Oliver Twins collection may be the most exciting release for the Evercade to date. For those of you who don't know, the Oliver Twins refer to Philip and Andrew Oliver, who are two brothers who once won a Guinness World Record for developing a huge amount of games in the 8-bit era. Add to that they started when they were teenagers, and that they created the much-loved Dizzy franchise, and you can understand why they get top billing on this release. Now, it's also of note that all profits and royalties from this release will go to the National Video Game Museum in Sheffield in the UK, which coincidentally is a place I visited to record footage for an upcoming episode of our travel vlog series, Jet Lagged and Loving It. So watch out for that when that drops. The collection features the following games: The Fantastic Adventures of Dizzy, Wonderland Dizzy, Panic Dizzy, Go Dizzy Go, Dizzy the Adventurer, Mystery World Dizzy, and Treasure Island Dizzy. So you can see perhaps why I thought it should be called the Dizzy and Friends collection. In terms of friends, the other games include Dreamworld Pogey, who is a character featured in Dizzy, and also Super Robin Hood, Firehawk, and Professional BMX Simulator. Now, as always in these reviews of the Evercade games, I will take a look through each of the games in detail to work out if you should actually add this to your collection. The first game we'll look at is Dizzy the Adventurer, which is by far my favourite game in the Dizzy series. It would appear that the games presented in this collection are NES ports, which, to be honest, is a shame, as I remember playing many of the same games on my Amiga 500, and those versions had better graphics than the NES. It's also worth noting that this game, Dizzy the Adventurer, will be more familiar to many of you as Dizzy Prince of the Yoke Folk, but clearly it had a name change when it was released on the Nintendo console. If you've never played a Dizzy game before, here's basically what you were in for. Most of the Dizzy games on this cart are puzzle adventure platform games where you control a walking, talking egg known as Dizzy. In each of his adventures you must collect items and interact with non-player characters to complete fetch quests and do some platforming to defeat the evil wizard Zax. You always have an inventory where you can pick up and hold 2 or 3 items to solve puzzles. Dizzy Prince of the Yoke Folk does a great job at teaching players how this works on the very first screen, as you start off the game trapped in a cave and must pick up and use 3 items in a row to escape. It really does teach you the mechanics of how everything else you'll do in the game is going to work within the opening minute. Now, one thing I always loved about these games is that unlike Mario, where you would continually run and jump through levels to get to the end, the Dizzy games would feel like a cross between Mario and a Monkey Island style point and click adventure. Almost every screen you encounter will feature a puzzle or a character whom you can interact with, and you need to speak with them to find out what items are needed to progress beyond them. This can range from taking a joke book to cheer up a sad princess, or taking a small cage to catch a Pogie. Yes, Pogie as in Pogie of Dreamworld. We will speak of him later. Dizzy the Adventurer is perhaps the shortest Dizzy game featured in this collection, and considering most of the games come from an era where you would have to complete the game in one sitting, it is always the Dizzy game I have returned to most over the years, as it feels like a good length for an afternoon's playthrough. The fact that the Evercade gives you the option to save your games at any point makes each of the games a blast to chip away at. This will also test to see if I still think that Dizzy the Adventurer is my favourite Dizzy game, once I've been able to play through all of them at my own pace. Next up we have The Fantastic Adventures of Dizzy, and what can I say, it's more Dizzy. And just like the Prince of the Yoke Folk, it's another solid adventure. You once again have to defeat Zax and rescue Dizzy's girlfriend Daisy. Unlike some of the games in the series that feature static screens that you have to move between, this is one of the games that features scrolling locations. Scrolling! Although these are just larger screens that you move between and are not completely open-ended like a Sonic or Mario level. This game gives Dizzy a damage meter, which will quickly fill up if you touch any monsters or bugs that populate the world. You have to keep an eye on this, as Dizzy doesn't show any animation or slowdown at all to show that he's taking any damage, and you can be caught off guard by this, so be careful. Now, another big issue I found with this particular Dizzy game is it is possible to drop essential items that you need to complete the game hidden behind scenery, which means it's nigh on impossible to retrieve them, as you'll have no indication for where you drop them. This can be an easy mistake to make, and as a large area of the games take place within a sprawling network of tree houses at the start of the game, backtracking your steps to look for a lost item may prove frustrating. Despite this, the gameplay, music and characters you meet along the way still make this another great adventure you will have fun exploring. Now, to take a break from the egg for just a moment, let's take a look at Firehawk, which is a fun top-down shooter game. You control a plane and have to shoot enemies and destroy enemy bases whilst aiming to rescue your comrades. This adds a lot of strategy to the game, as you first have to navigate your way through fire to locate the person you're trying to rescue. Then you have to decide if you're going to fight all of the enemies off in the area, or if you're going to try and swoop down and rescue the person, where of course you will take a little bit of damage, but it may save some time then destroying all the enemies. The game does give you an indicator of where to go to as you head to rescue the person. This felt a very modern inclusion in the game, as these regularly pop up in modern shooters just to guide you to where you have to go to next, instead of fully exploring the areas yourself. In the case of Firehawk, this is definitely a good thing, as the teeny tiny graphics of the person you are rescuing could easily be missed otherwise, especially if you're playing in handheld mode. Now, back to Dizzy, we have the oldest Dizzy game in the collection here in Treasure Island Dizzy. It is a bit odd that the original Dizzy game isn't included in this collection, but with the focus on NES ports, maybe it was that there wasn't an NES port of the original Dizzy game. Once again, this is more of Dizzy's usual fun adventures, and truthfully speaking, at this stage it's getting a little bit tricky to review each of the Dizzy adventure games separately. They're all very, very similar, and now it's just about pointing out the individual quirks or areas that they improved as they went along. A Dizzy game is a Dizzy game, and they're all great, but you can see the progress through the series of where they improved a few gameplay mechanics and sorted out a few bugs. As an early Dizzy game, this one doesn't have scrolling levels, but that's fine. It just means instead of there being wasted expanses of level to walk through to bulk out the time it takes to play it, each screen has its own unique personality. The inventory in this game is a little bit of a pain compared to later games, in that it's on screen the whole time, and the way you select items to use them is by clicking one button, and that will pick up, put down and use the items you are holding. This sounds okay at first, but if you have the items in the wrong order that you need to use them, it can cause disaster. As an example, I got a snorkel which allowed me to go underwater, and whilst exploring the bottom of the ocean I figured I'd try to use some of the other items I was carrying to see if they'd be of any use. And I instantly found when cycling through the items that I had put down my snorkel, and I drowned instantly. Yeah. In this instance, I felt it would have been a little bit better for them to give you a limited time for you to hold your breath underwater, like how Sonic does before the bubbles come up and the countdown happens. That way you could have picked up the snorkel again if you accidentally dropped it. As it is though, you get an instant death, which meant restarting the game, which, to be honest, felt a little unfair. Likewise, when I restarted, I decided not to take the other items underwater, so that if there was any booty I wanted to pick up from the deep sea below, I didn't risk dropping the snorkel. However, there was another problem. I soon discovered that I needed a pogo stick, which I had left back on land. No problem normally if you need to backtrack to get an item, but because you couldn't backtrack past a fish which is in your way without the pogo stick, it meant I couldn't jump over the fish to get the pogo stick. So, once again I had to restart. This kind of instant death and unwinnable situation is common in games of the past, but modern David finds this a bitter pill to swallow. The next game in the collection is BMX Simulator, and it's exactly what you would expect a game called BMX Simulator to be. You are simulating being on a BMX. Played from a top-down perspective, you race around various tracks in races against two computer-controlled opponents. This game adds some variety to the cartridge, but truthfully wasn't a game I enjoyed. Now, not all games should be easy, and some do require skill and practice to master, but even on the easiest track I was just constantly crashing into every little bump in the road, and then you fall off your bike. Many racing games will have that if you hit rough patches you'll slow down or lose acceleration, but nope, instead you just repeatedly get knocked off your bike and it becomes quite frustrating pretty quick. I kept going with it and eventually I did get the hand of the controls to some degree, and it's a game where you constantly have to accelerate, then let go of the acceleration button as you go around literally every corner and every obstacle. In one sense this is true to actual driving, just to make sure you slow down and don't crash on corners, but it doesn't make for a very fun game. A half step back towards Dizzy here with Dreamworld Pogey. This is another game which is really what the Evercade is all about, in that it's a classic game that was never released back in the day. The game is a 2D platformer and it was funded on Kickstarter when it was found in the Oliver Twins loft. It's much like a Sonic and Mario game in that you're basically just running through a level and picking up collectibles, whereas a normal Dizzy game is a lot more about solving puzzles and meeting and interacting with characters. Now, Dreamworld Pogey is actually a really fun game to play, and it's a shame it wasn't released back in the day. Now, perhaps it was the Pogie that wasn't seen as a marketable mascot in its own right outside the Dizzy games. Now, I don't know this for certain, but as I mentioned earlier, the character is a small purple mouse thing. And whilst in the game it looks slightly odd, but cute enough, when you see the thing in more detailed artwork, it's another story entirely. The box art of the game highlights that you can pick up a power-up in the game and transform into a Pogey. And it's a werewolf-like transformation that gives you more fur and pointy ears, and you're basically a werewolf version of Pogey. This split-screen image of the character doesn't really reveal what the character normally looks like though, like when you complete a level and see it in its full gory glory. When you see it on this screen, the Pogey kind of looks like a head with legs and arms coming out of it with no body. The nose is a little bit too realistic looking and has visible nostrils, combined with the thick eyebrows and Prince Charles ears, make it for one ugly son of a gun. Now, I do feel a little bit bad that I'm body shaming a Pogey here, but realistically this gave me the vibes of the realistic Sonic the Hedgehog with the human teeth and yeah, everything, yuck. Up next we have Go Dizzy Go, which is a different kind of Dizzy game and is best described as a Pac-Man style game. In it you control Dizzy from a top-down perspective and have to collect items in a maze whilst avoiding baddies. It's a lot of fun to play, and there are bonus levels which add time-based challenges and icy ground as an example, which means that you have to use more strategy in how you move across the levels. Yeah, it's a good one. This is another game where it's great to play it in short bursts, and it's good in that sense that the Evercade can let you just save your game as you go along, because you may not want to play it for hours and hours like getting into an adventure, but just doing a bunch of levels here and there in between other Dizzy adventure games. Yeah, it's good. Mystery World Dizzy is another game that wasn't released back in the day, and it's incredible to think that so many games were just laying around, finished, but unreleased. It really makes you wonder what other treasures are hidden in attics of developers across the world. Resident Evil 1.5. This game is another fun Dizzy adventure, but it's worth noting that the game really did start to glitch out on me a couple of times when I loaded it up. Upon investigation, I realised that this happened when I changed the game to be in the PAL TV mode setting, which I'd only selected absent-mindedly on the title screen. The actual game has some of the best graphics of any Dizzy game in the collection, and you can tell that this is a much later developed game, as it even warns you not to drop items behind the scenery. The inventory is back just to 2 items, and you do have to juggle through them on the screen rather than choose them from a specific item menu. This game also brings back the one-hit kills on Dizzy, and with all the rats running about, you do have to be careful to time your moves to dodge getting hit. Panic Dizzy should be one of the most fun games in the collection, but it just proved really annoying really quickly. It's a puzzle game which has a few varieties of gameplay for you to choose from. This includes matching up symbols, slide puzzle style levels, and removing tiles in a set order. Most of these play mostly the same, in that you control Dizzy or one of his friends, such as Daisy or Dozy or Denzel, etc., and you grab a tile that is falling down the screen in a Tetris-style well, and then you throw them back up to a new position to match it with other tiles. In theory this is okay, but even though the tiles don't feel like they're falling that fast, the tiles are so big that within a minute or two it's always game over as they reach the bottom of the screen very quickly. The reason for this is that you often need to grab a few tiles at once to reorder them, and they stack up one on top of another, and you quickly find that you can't move across the screen as the stack you are holding clonks and bashes into some of the tiles that you're trying to maneuver around, which means that you can never really get on top of the amount of tiles that you're holding. This game is just something that seems like it should work, but unfortunately doesn't. One of the biggest examples of this is the sliding puzzle game, where you may need to rearrange the top line of the puzzle, but in order to do so you have to move all of the other pieces out of the way to get to it. In this sense it'd be like having to remove all 4 tyres from a car just to be able to fix one. It's just a bit frustrating. Then there are the puzzles where you have to move across tiles in the right order to clear them. This is different to the other modes in the games and it feels fun. I did however become aware that on some levels it was impossible to fail, as you could only press the D-pad in the direction it would tell you is available on screen, and with there only being one direction available, you would basically complete the level no matter what. This would be okay if it was a tutorial level, but I found it was several consecutive levels, quite a few levels in. Super Robin Hood is a great game in the collection and was the first hit from the Oliver twins. The game is an action platformer. It reminded me of a Metroid game in many ways, with its puzzles and platforming, shooting, and whilst you don't roll up into a ball like you can on Metroid, you do have to slide under gaps, so yeah, I just got a Metroid vibe from it. The game can be completed in about 30 to 40 minutes, and it is a fun game that, again, you'll be pleased has a save function on the Evercade, just so that an annoying bat or an archer doesn't end the fun early for you and you have to start again. It is worth noting that old games that are short by modern standards relied on easy deaths and tough challenges to increase their lifespan, and the ability to save now does alter the way we play these games. Truthfully, if I couldn't save, I probably wouldn't get through a lot of them. But for speedrunners, the ability to save and learn a game inside out will help train players up for that daunting no saves run. The final game on the menu for today is Wonderland Dizzy, which gives you the ability to play as both Dizzy and Daisy this time. This is the final game included in this collection and was another modern release of a previously unavailable game. And this one was super strange to play for me. Now, whilst I say it was never previously released, the game is in fact based on Magic Land Dizzy, which I played on the Amiga 500. Magic Land Dizzy is possibly my second favourite Dizzy game after Prince of the Yoke Folk, but it's not exactly as I remember it by quite a long shot. It seems to follow the same basic blueprint in the sense that it's still a fun Dizzy adventure, and there's still lots of the same locations like Stonehenge and a well and a witch and this kind of thing on the game. But loads of things have just been slightly rejigged and it's not quite the same. Things were different enough that I just generally felt a little bit discombobulated, as my memory couldn't trust if I actually remembered the things I was seeing, or if it was just that I was so familiar with Dizzy by this point of the review that the scenarios were making me think that I remembered it. Either way, it was another great addition to the package. So there you have it, the Oliver Twins collection for the Evercade, and I would say this is a good 4.5 out of 5 if you are an Evercade player. It's got lots of puzzle adventure platform games, which if that is your cup of tea, then there is hours and hours worth of great games on here. It's also got the puzzle games. The Pac-Man style one is good, the Panic Dizzy one, maybe I need to really force myself to get into it, but that one really didn't work for me. BMX Simulator I thought was the weakest game here. Super Robin Hood, Firehawk are also great games. I would have liked to have seen perhaps if there were the Amiga versions of the games on the collection rather than the NES ports, just because in my opinion the Amiga games, well, they just have better graphics. Now, It may have been easier to have included the NES versions, and maybe if we ever get a Oliver Twins collection too, because as I mentioned, it didn't have the very first Dizzy game included on this, there perhaps could be, perhaps a bit like we've seen with previous Atari collections on the Evercade, where the same game is included on two different collections, like Centipede, I think, where we got the 2600 version and then we got the 7800 version, which was vastly upgraded. If they could do this and perhaps even include the iOS port of Dizzy Prince of the Yolk Folk, that would be great. For those of you who don't remember it, Dizzy Prince of the Yolk Folk for iOS came out several years ago but got left kind of lost in time when Apple updated the iOS platform, and the developers were then needed to have updated games to make sure old games that came before the big change of the operating system happened, if that makes sense. Either way, Dizzy got left behind. Maybe the Evercade could be the place for it. But anyway, that is the Oliver Twins collection for the Evercade. Do make sure you check out the other Evercade reviews we've got up on the Extreme Improv XStreamed YouTube channel, and make sure you smash that subscribe button. And from me, my name is still David Pustansky, and of course, go to the website www.extreme.tv, where you'll be able to find the written review version of this, plus tons and tons of gaming news and loads of other cool stuff. So, for me, until next time, stay safe, always stay extremed, and keep on playing, guys. This isn't switched on.